The Mafia boss walked into the old gym and froze. His maid had blindfolded his deaf, disabled son and was teaching him to fight in complete darkness. What she did during the blackout attack 3 days later made him realize he'd been protecting his son all wrong. Don Alvarez wasn't supposed to be home. The deal in Miami had collapsed 2 hours early, and he'd driven through the night instead of staying at the hotel. His men didn't know. His wife didn't know. That's how he preferred it. Unpredictable, untraceable. He killed the engine 3 blocks from the mansion and walked the rest of the way through the storm. Rain hammered the pavement. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, turning the world white and black. White and black. The side gate was unlocked.
Sloppy.
He'd deal with that later. He moved through the gardens, past the fountain, toward the east wing. His clothes were soaked. His shoes squelched against marble as he entered through the conservatory door. That's when he heard it. A thud. Then another. Rhythmic. Deliberate. It came from the old gymnasium, a room no one used anymore. His father had built it decades ago, back when the family name still meant something in legitimate circles. Now it was storage. Dust and forgotten equipment. Alvarez moved toward the sound, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun at his back. The door was cracked open. Warm light spilled into the hallway. He looked inside. And froze. His son, Mateo, stood in the center of the room, barefoot on the mat. He wore a blindfold, thick, black, covering his eyes completely. His thin arms were raised in a defensive stance, trembling slightly but steady. And crouched beside him, guiding his hands, adjusting his posture, was Rosa, the maid. She was whispering something, her lips close to Mateo's ear, though Alvarez knew his son couldn't hear her. Mateo was deaf. Had been since birth. The fall 2 years ago had taken his ability to walk without a cane. The boy was fragile. Breakable. What the hell was this? Rosa tapped Mateo's wrist twice. He shifted his weight. She tapped his shoulder. He turned his body, feeling the air, anticipating movement that wasn't there. Then Rosa stepped back and clapped her hands once. Sharp, loud. Mateo didn't react to the sound, of course. But a second later, Rosa stomped her foot hard against the floor. Mateo's head snapped toward the vibration. His body coiled. He dropped into a lower stance, hands up, knees bent.
Rosa smiled.
She nodded. Alvarez felt his blood turn to ice. He shoved the door open. It slammed against the wall with a crack like a gunshot. Rosa spun around, eyes wide. Mateo pulled off the blindfold, blinking in confusion. His face went pale when he saw his father. "What?" Alvarez said, voice low and venomous. "Do you think you're doing?" Rosa straightened immediately. She didn't flinch, didn't stammer. She met his gaze head-on. "Training him," she said simply. "Training him." Alvarez's voice rose. He stepped into the room, water dripping from his coat. "You're humiliating him. You put a blindfold on my son, my disabled son, and you're making him stumble around like a fool." "He's not stumbling," Rosa said, calm but firm. "He's learning." "Learning what?" "To be a joke." Alvarez moved closer. Mateo backed away, reaching for his cane. "He can't hear. He can barely walk. And you think teaching him to fight is going to help?" Rosa's jaw tightened. "He asked me to." Alvarez laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "He's 16. He doesn't know what he's asking for." Mateo's hands moved rapidly, forming signs. His face was tight with frustration, with something close to anger. Alvarez didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Rosa. "You're fired," he said. Rosa didn't react. She just stood there, arms at her sides, breathing steady. "Did you hear me?" Alvarez took another step forward. "You're done. Pack your things. Be gone by morning." "It's storming," Rosa said quietly. "The roads are flooded. Then you stay in the servants' quarters tonight. But tomorrow you're gone. And if I ever see you near my son again," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Mateo's hands moved again, faster now, almost frantic. He was signing something, pleading, maybe, or protesting. Alvarez finally looked at him. For just a second, He saw something in his son's face he hadn't seen in years. Determination. Not fear. Not resignation. Not the quiet sadness that had lived in Mateo's eyes since the accident. Determination. It unsettled him more than the blindfold, more than the fight training. Go to your room, Alvarez said, softer now but still firm. We'll talk in the morning. Mateo stared at him for a long moment. Then he grabbed his cane, turned, and walked out of the gym without looking back. His steps were slow but deliberate.
He didn't stumble once.
The door closed behind him. Alvarez turned back to Rosa. She hadn't moved. What exactly were you teaching him? He asked, quieter now, but the edge was still there. To survive, Rosa said. Without sound. Without sight. Using only balance and touch. Why? Because the world doesn't wait for permission to hurt us, she said. And he deserves to protect himself. Alvarez stared at her. She didn't look away. He's not like other kids, Alvarez said finally. He can't be. No, Rosa agreed. He's stronger than other kids. You just don't see it yet. Alvarez felt something twist in his chest. Anger, maybe. Or guilt. He couldn't tell anymore. You're still fired, he said. Rosa nodded once. I know. She walked past him, out of the gym, into the dark hallway. Her footsteps faded. Alvarez stood alone in the empty room. The mat was still warm where Mateo had been standing. The blindfold lay crumpled on the floor. He picked it up. It was heavier than he expected. Outside, the storm raged on. Alvarez didn't sleep. He paced his office for 2 hours, the blindfold still in his hand, Rosa's words circling in his head like vultures. He's stronger than other kids. You just don't see it yet. Nonsense. Dangerous nonsense. Mateo was vulnerable. The world would crush him if given the chance. That's why Alvarez kept him here, safe, behind walls and guards and locked gates. That's why he'd built this fortress in the first place. And Rosa had crossed a line. At 3 a.m, he called her to his office. She arrived 5 minutes later, still dressed, hair damp from the rain. She'd been awake too. Sit, Alvarez said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Rosa remained standing. I'd rather not. It wasn't a request. She sat. Alvarez leaned back in his chair, studying her. Rosa had worked in the house for 3 years. Quiet. Efficient. Never caused problems. His wife had hired her after the previous maid quit, and honestly, Alvarez had barely noticed her existence until tonight. Now, he couldn't stop noticing. Tell me the truth, he said. What were you really doing with my son? I already told you. You were teaching him to fight, Alvarez interrupted. But why the blindfold? Why the games? Rosa's expression didn't change. They're not games. Then what are they? She leaned forward slightly, hands folded in her lap. Your son can't hear. That's not going to change. But most people rely on sound to sense danger. Footsteps. Voices. Doors opening. Mateo doesn't have that. I know what deaf means, Alvarez said coldly. Rosa continued, as if he hadn't spoken. So, I'm teaching him to feel danger instead. Vibrations through the floor. Changes in air pressure. Shifts in weight and balance. The blindfold removes sight, so he learns to trust his other senses. Alvarez stared at her. That's insane. It's survival. He's not a soldier. He's a child. He's 16, Rosa said quietly. Old enough to know he's being treated like glass. The words hit harder than Alvarez expected. He felt his jaw tighten. You don't know anything about him, he said. You don't know what he's been through. I know he fell 2 years ago, Rosa said. I know he uses a cane. I know he still has nightmares about it because I hear him crying through the walls at night. Alvarez's hands curled into fists on the desk. I also know, Rosa continued, that he came to me 6 weeks ago and asked me to teach him. Not with words, with signs. He'd been watching videos online. Learning. Planning. 6 weeks. Alvarez's voice dropped to a whisper. You've been doing this for 6 weeks.
Rosa nodded.
Behind my back. He asked me not to tell you. Alvarez stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. You work for me, not him. I work for your household, Rosa said, still calm, still steady. That includes him. You're twisting this, Alvarez said, voice rising again. You're making it sound noble, but all I see is you putting my son in danger. Teaching him to fight? Against who? Against what? He can barely defend himself against a strong wind. Rosa's eyes flashed, just for a second. The first crack in her composure. He defended himself against 3 boys last month, she said. Alvarez froze. What? At the park. Your guards took him there. 3 boys saw his cane and thought it would be funny to knock it away. Rosa's voice was quiet but sharp.
He fell.
They laughed. And when one of them shoved him again, Mateo grabbed the boy's wrist and twisted it just enough to make him stop. Alvarez felt the floor tilt beneath him. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because Mateo asked the guards not to, Rosa said. He didn't want you to stop letting him go outside. The silence in the room was suffocating. Alvarez sat back down slowly. He could have been hurt, he said finally. He was hurt, Rosa replied. But he handled it. Because I taught him how. Alvarez shook his head. You don't understand. My life, what I do. It puts him at risk. Every single day. If people know he exists, if they think they can use him against me, then teach him to survive it, Rosa said firmly. Don't just lock him away and hope no one ever finds him. Alvarez looked at her for a long time. She looked back, unflinching. You're still fired, he said quietly.
Rosa stood.
I know. The roads will be clear by morning. One of the drivers will take you into the city. I don't need a driver. You'll take one anyway, Alvarez said. And you'll take 2 months severance. Consider it payment for your discretion. Rosa's mouth tightened, but she nodded. She turned to leave. Rosa, Alvarez said. She stopped, hand on the door. If he gets hurt because of what you taught him, Alvarez said softly, I'll find you. Rosa looked back over her shoulder. If he gets hurt because of what I didn't teach him, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. She left. The door clicked shut. Alvarez sat alone in the dim office, the storm still pounding against the windows. He didn't throw the blindfold away. He kept it on his desk, just in case. Morning came cold and gray. Alvarez hadn't slept. He'd spent the hours before dawn reviewing security footage, looking for evidence of Rosa's training sessions. He found them, dozens of clips over the past 6 weeks. Mateo in the gym, Rosa guiding his movements, teaching him to fall correctly, to sense vibrations, to move without sight. Each clip made Alvarez's chest tighter. At 7, he went looking for his son. Mateo wasn't in his room, wasn't in the library. The guard said he'd gone to the garden an hour ago, alone. Alvarez found him sitting on the stone bench near the rose bushes, the ones his mother had planted before she died. Mateo's cane rested beside him. He was staring at nothing, face unreadable. Alvarez approached slowly, making sure his footsteps were heavy enough to register. Mateo didn't turn around. Alvarez sat down beside him, leaving space between them. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Alvarez tapped the bench twice, a simple rhythm. Mateo finally looked at him. His hands moved slowly, deliberately. You sent her away. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Alvarez nodded. I had to. Mateo's jaw tightened. His hands moved again, faster now.
Why?
Because she was putting you in danger. Alvarez signed back. His signing was rough, unpracticed. He had learned the basics years ago, but rarely used them. It had always been easier to have Mateo read lips or write things down. Now, facing his son's anger, he regretted that laziness. I asked her to teach me, Mateo signed. She didn't force me. I wanted this. You don't understand what you're asking for, Alvarez signed. I understand more than you think. Mateo stood abruptly, grabbing his cane. He walked a few steps away, then turned back. His face was flushed, his hands shaking slightly as he signed. You think I don't know what you do? You think I don't see the guards? The guns? The men who visit in the middle of the night? Alvarez felt something cold settle in his stomach. I'm not stupid, Mateo continued. I know why you keep me hidden. Why I can't go to regular school. Why the windows in my room are bulletproof. Mateo. I'm tired, Mateo signed, cutting him off. Tired of being locked away. Tired of everyone treating me like I'm made of paper. You're not made of paper, Alvarez signed back. You're my son. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Mateo's hands were almost violent now. From life? From everything. From people who would hurt you to get to me, Alvarez signed. He stood, facing his son directly. You don't know what they're capable of, and you don't know what I'm capable of, Mateo signed. The words hung between them. Alvarez stared at his son, really looked at him. Maybe for the first time in months. Mateo had grown, not just taller, but broader in the shoulders. His arms had muscle definition that hadn't been there before. His stance was steadier, more grounded. When had that happened? Rosa taught you more than fighting, didn't she? Alvarez signed slowly. Mateo nodded. She taught me that being different doesn't mean being weak.
She taught me that I can adapt.
That I can be strong in ways other people aren't. And, what if you get hurt? Alvarez signed. What if someone uses those skills as an excuse to hurt you worse? Mateo's expression softened slightly. What if I get hurt because I don't have those skills? It was almost word for word what Rosa had said. Alvarez looked away, toward the roses. Some of them were dying, petals browning at the edges. He should have had the gardeners trim them weeks ago. I saw the footage, he signed finally. From the park. The boys who pushed you. Mateo's face went carefully blank. Why didn't you tell me? Alvarez signed. Because you would have stopped letting me go outside, Mateo signed. You would have added more guards. Made the walls higher. And I would have disappeared even more. I would have protected you. I don't want to be protected, Mateo signed, and there was something desperate in the way his hands moved. I want to be capable. There's a difference. Alvarez felt the words like a punch to the chest. He thought about Mateo as a child, before the deafness, before the fall, before everything. A bright, loud boy who'd loved climbing trees and racing through the halls. Fearless. When had Alvarez started seeing him as fragile? When had he stopped seeing him as a person? She's still leaving, Alvarez signed. I can't take that back. Mateo's shoulders slumped. He nodded, resigned. Then his hands moved one more time. Will you at least let me say goodbye? Alvarez hesitated. Every instinct screamed no. Cut ties. Move on. Keep Mateo away from people who made him think he could be anything other than safe. But looking at his son's face, at the quiet grief there, Alvarez couldn't say no. 5 minutes, he signed. In the kitchen. I'll be watching. Mateo nodded. Relief flickered across his face. He walked past Alvarez, back toward the house, moving with that careful but steady gait. Alvarez stayed in the garden, surrounded by dying roses. He thought about strength, about protection, about the difference between the two. And he realized, for the first time, that he didn't know which one his son needed more. Rosa's room was small.
A bed.
A dresser. A single window overlooking the back courtyard. She'd lived here for 3 years and had accumulated almost nothing. A few books, 2 changes of clothes, a photograph in a cracked frame. She picked up the photograph now, running her thumb across the glass. Her brother, Miguel, grinned back at her. 12 years old in the photo. Gap-toothed. Scraped knees. Holding up a soccer ball like it was a trophy. He'd be 24 now. If he'd lived. Rosa set the photo down carefully and continued packing. She folded her clothes with practiced efficiency, placing them in the worn duffel bag she'd brought with her years ago. Everything she owned fit inside it. That had always been intentional, easier to leave when you traveled light. A knock at the door. She turned. Mateo stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane. His eyes were red. Rosa's chest tightened, but she kept her face neutral. She gestured him inside. Mateo entered slowly, closing the door behind him. His hands moved.
I'm sorry.
You have nothing to apologize for, Rosa said aloud, knowing he'd read her lips. He wouldn't have fired you if I hadn't asked you to train me. Rosa shook her head. She moved her hands, signing back. Your father was always going to find out, and he was always going to react this way.
Why?
Because he's afraid, Rosa signed. Not of me. Of losing you. Mateo's expression crumpled slightly. I didn't mean to cause problems. Rosa crossed the small room and placed her hands on his shoulders, waiting until he met her eyes. Listen to me, she signed. What we did, what I taught you, it matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. But you're leaving. That doesn't change the truth, Rosa signed. You're capable. You're strong. Remember that. Mateo nodded, but tears spilled down his cheeks anyway. Rosa pulled him into a hug. He was taller than her now. When had that happened? He leaned into her shoulder, and she felt him shake with silent sobs. She held him until he pulled away, wiping his face roughly. Why did you help me?
He signed.
You didn't have to.
Rosa hesitated.
Then she picked up the photograph from the dresser and showed it to him. My brother, she signed.
Miguel.
Mateo studied the photo, then looked at her questioningly. Rosa sat on the edge of the bed. Mateo sat beside her. She began to sign, slowly, making sure he caught every word. Miguel was born with cerebral palsy. He could walk, but not well. He fell a lot. People stared. Some were cruel. Mateo's face softened with understanding. When he was 12, there was a riot in our neighborhood. Political protest that turned violent. My mother told us to stay inside, but Miguel wanted to see what was happening. He went to the window. Rosa's hands paused. She took a breath. Someone threw a brick. It came through the glass. Miguel fell. By the time the ambulance came, it was too late. Mateo's hand found hers.
He squeezed gently.
After he died, Rosa continued, I couldn't stop thinking, if he'd known how to protect himself, if someone had taught him how to fall safely, how to move quickly despite his disability, maybe he would have survived. That's not your fault, Mateo signed with his free hand. I know, Rosa signed back. But it changed me. I started volunteering at a community center, teaching self-defense to people with disabilities. People the world told couldn't fight back. She smiled slightly, remembering. I had a student once, a girl with one arm. Everyone said she couldn't learn martial arts. In 6 months, she could take down men twice her size. Another student was blind. He learned to fight by sound and touch. He became better than most sighted fighters I knew. Like what you taught me, Mateo signed.
Rosa nodded.
Exactly like that. I learned that disability doesn't mean helpless. It just means different. And different can be powerful. Why did you stop teaching? Rosa's expression darkened. The program was shut down. The government said we were training militants. They raided the center. Arrested some of us. I ran. She looked down at her hands. I've been running ever since. Taking quiet jobs. Staying invisible. Until I met you. Mateo was quiet for a long moment. Then his hands moved. You saw Miguel in me. Yes, Rosa signed, honestly. But I also saw someone who deserved a chance. Who deserved to be more than just protected. Thank you, Mateo signed. For everything. Rosa cupped his face briefly, the way she used to with Miguel. Be careful, she signed. Your father loves you. But fear makes people controlling. Don't let his fear make you small. Mateo nodded. A voice called from downstairs. One of the guards. The car was ready.
Rosa stood.
She picked up her duffel bag, slung it over her shoulder. She took one last look around the small room that had been home. Then she looked at Mateo. Remember what I taught you, she signed. Not just the fighting. The balance. The awareness. The trust in yourself. I will, Mateo signed. Rosa kissed his forehead, then walked past him, out the door, down the stairs. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Mateo standing in the hallway, hands moving in a final message she couldn't see. I'll make you proud. Outside, the driver was waiting. Rosa climbed into the car, and the mansion disappeared behind her. But her work wasn't finished. Not yet. Alvarez had a rule. Never bring Mateo to business meetings. But today, he broke it. Not intentionally. The meeting had been moved up 3 hours, and his wife was away visiting her sister. The tutor had called in sick. And Mateo had actually asked through careful signing if he could come along. Just to see the warehouse. Just to understand what his father did. Alvarez had hesitated. Then agreed, with conditions. Mateo would stay in the upstairs office. Away from the men. Away from the talk.
Safe.
The warehouse sat on the industrial edge of the city, surrounded by rusted fencing and empty lots. Inside, it smelled like oil and old concrete. Alvarez's lieutenants were already there when he arrived, 7 men sitting around a metal table, cigarettes burning, coffee going cold. He led Mateo upstairs first, to the small observation office that overlooked the main floor. The window was one-way glass. Mateo could see down. They couldn't see up. "Stay here," Alvarez signed. "Don't come down. Don't make noise." Mateo nodded, settling into the chair by the window with his tablet. He'd brought homework, or at least that's what he'd told his father. Alvarez left, locking the door from the outside out of habit. Downstairs, the meeting began. Territory disputes. Payment schedules. A shipment from the coast that had gone missing. Standard business. Brutal business. Alvarez listened, gave orders, made decisions that would affect lives and livelihoods. An hour in, the tension eased. Cigarettes were lit. Someone made a joke. Then Santo, Alvarez's oldest lieutenant, a man with gray in his beard and scars on his knuckles, leaned back in his chair and laughed.
"Hey, boss," Santo said.
"Heard you fired that maid." The quiet 1 inch. Alvarez's jaw tightened. News travels fast. "Marco's cousin works in your kitchen," Santo said, grinning. "Said she was teaching your kids some kind of kung fu shit." The other men laughed. Alvarez didn't. "It wasn't kung fu," he said flatly. "Whatever it was," Santo continued, oblivious or uncaring. "It's hilarious. I mean, no offense, boss, but what's the point? The kid can't hear, can barely walk. What's he gonna do in a real fight? Sign his way out of it." More laughter. Upstairs, Mateo's hands froze on his tablet. He'd been half watching, half reading, but now his eyes were locked on the men below. He couldn't hear them, but he could see Santo's exaggerated gestures. Could see the way the others leaned back, mouths open, shoulders shaking. They were laughing. At him. "Enough," Alvarez said quietly. But Santo was on a roll. "I'm just saying, if someone comes after him, what's he gonna do? Feel the vibrations? Touch the bullets?" He mimed dodging invisible punches, stumbling dramatically. "Look, I'm fighting blind." The men roared. Mateo's chest tightened. He knew, logically, that people thought these things. He'd seen it in their faces his whole life. The pity, the dismissal, the assumption that he was broken. But hearing it, no. Seeing it, from his father's own men, in his father's own territory, hit differently. "I said enough," Alvarez repeated, louder now. Santo raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. I'm just joking, boss. No harm meant." "Then joke about something else," Alvarez said coldly.
Santo nodded, smile fading.
The meeting continued. But upstairs, Mateo couldn't focus anymore. His hands trembled. His breathing was shallow. He closed his eyes and tried to remember Rosa's lessons. Feel the ground beneath you. Center yourself.
Breathe.
But the images kept replaying. Santo's mocking gestures, the laughter, the way even his father's authority hadn't fully stopped it. Just delayed it. Would it always be like this? Would he always be the joke no one took seriously? Mateo opened his eyes. He looked down at the men again. They'd moved on. Talking about money now, about routes and schedules. Santo was lighting another cigarette. None of them looked up. None of them knew he'd seen. Mateo picked up his cane and stood. He walked to the corner of the office where a small punching bag hung, probably left over from when the warehouse had been a gym decades ago. He set his cane aside. He closed his eyes. He felt the floor beneath his bare feet. Felt the slight vibration from the men's voices below, the hum of distant traffic, the rhythmic thud of his own heartbeat. Then he struck.
Once. Twice.
3 times. His knuckles stung. His balance wavered, but he adjusted, shifted his weight the way Rosa had taught him. "You're not helpless," her voice echoed in his memory. "You're just different. And different can be powerful." He hit the bag again. Harder. Downstairs, the meeting ended. Chairs scraped. Men filed out. Alvarez shook hands, made promises, issued warnings. Then he climbed the stairs and unlocked the office door. Mateo was sitting in the chair again, tablet in his lap, face carefully neutral. But his knuckles were red. Alvarez noticed. He always noticed. "You okay?" he signed. Mateo nodded, but his eyes told a different story. On the drive home, Mateo stared out the window, watching the city blur past. He thought about Santo's laughter, about his father's silence, about Rosa's absence.
And he made a decision.
He would prove them wrong. Not someday. Not eventually.
Soon. He didn't know how yet.
But the seed was planted. And seeds, given time, become something stronger than anyone expects. Rosa had been gone for 3 days. She'd taken a room in a boarding house on the south side of the city, the kind of place that didn't ask questions, didn't keep records, and accepted cash. The room was smaller than her space at the mansion, but it was hers. She'd spent the first day sleeping, the second day looking for work, the third day trying not to think about Mateo. She failed at that last part. Now, on the evening of the third day, she sat in a cafe 2 blocks from the boarding house, nursing a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She had a newspaper open in front of her, but she wasn't reading it. She was watching. Old habits died hard. The cafe was nearly empty, just her, an elderly couple in the corner, and 2 men at the counter. The men had been there when she arrived. They'd ordered espresso, but hadn't touched it. That bothered her. Rosa had learned long ago to notice things that didn't fit. People who ordered food but didn't eat. People who faced the door instead of their companion. People who checked their phones too often or not at all. These men checked their phones constantly. And they kept glancing at the street. Rosa shifted slightly in her seat, angling herself to hear better. "Tomorrow night," one of them said, voice low. "During a storm. Power's supposed to go out around 10, the other replied. "That's when we move." The boss confirmed it.
Yeah.
Alvarez won't see it coming. He thinks his fortress is untouchable. Rosa's blood went cold. She kept her eyes on the newspaper, but every nerve in her body was suddenly awake. "What about the guards?" the first man asked. "Half of them will be dealing with the blackout. The rest we handle. Quick and quiet. And the family. Collateral. The boss wants Alvarez humiliated before we finish him. Taking out the wife and kid first sends the right message." Rosa's hand tightened around her coffee cup. "The kid. Mateo." "What time tomorrow?" the first man asked. "Meet at the warehouse at 9. We hit the mansion by 10:15, maybe 10:30. Whole thing should be done in under an hour." The men stood, dropped cash on the counter, and left. Rosa waited 30 seconds. Then she folded the newspaper, grabbed her coat, and followed. Outside, the street was dark. The men walked quickly, not looking back. Rosa kept her distance, staying in the shadows, moving with the trained silence of someone who'd done this before. They turned down an alley, climbed into a black SUV, drove off. Rosa memorized the license plate, then pulled out her phone. She stared at the screen. Who could she call? Not the police. They were either on Alvarez's payroll or his enemy's payroll. Either way, they wouldn't help. Not Alvarez directly. He'd made it clear she was finished. He wouldn't trust her. Might even think she was part of the plot. But Mateo. Rosa scrolled through her contacts. She still had the number for Carlos, one of the mansion's drivers. An older man, kind, someone who'd always treated her with respect. She dialed. It rang 4 times. Then voicemail. She cursed under her breath and hung up. She tried again. This time, he answered. "Hello. Carlos, it's Rosa." A pause.
Rosa?
"I thought you." "I need you to listen very carefully," Rosa interrupted. "Don't say my name again. Don't tell anyone I called. Just listen." "Okay," Carlos sounded confused, maybe a little scared. "Tomorrow night, there's going to be an attack on the mansion. During the blackout, multiple men. They're targeting the family. Silence. Carlos, did you hear me? Yes. Yes, I heard you. His voice was tight. How do you know this? That doesn't matter. What matters is you need to warn Mateo. Not Alvarez. Mateo. Why not the boss? Because Alvarez will lock everything down and assume it's handled, Rosa said. He'll trust his guards, his system, his walls. And he'll put Mateo somewhere he thinks is safe without teaching him what to do if it's not. And you think Mateo can? I know he can, Rosa said firmly. But only if he's prepared. Only if he knows what's coming. Carlos was quiet for a long moment. The boss will kill me if he finds out I talked to you. He'll kill you if his son dies and you didn't warn him, Rosa countered. Another pause. What do you want me to tell the boy? Carlos asked finally. Rosa took a breath. Tell him the blackout isn't an accident. Tell him to stay aware. To trust what I taught him. And tell him, she hesitated. Tell him Rosa says it's time to stop hiding. That's it. That's enough. He'll understand. And if I can't get to him? If the boss is watching too closely? Then find a way, Rosa said. You're creative. Leave a note. Send a text. I don't care how. Just make sure Mateo knows. All right, Carlos said quietly. I'll try. Don't try, Rosa said. Do it. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. She walked back to the boarding house, mind racing. She'd done what she could. Passed the warning. Now it was up to Mateo. And up to Alvarez whether he knew it or not. Inside her room, Rosa sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photograph of Miguel. I can't save everyone, she whispered to the image. But maybe I can save this one. Outside, the city hummed. The storm was building. And tomorrow night, everything would change. The storm arrived exactly as predicted. By 8 o'clock, the sky was black and swollen. Rain hammered the mansion's windows like fists demanding entry. Thunder rolled across the hills, deep and constant. Mateo sat in his room, doing homework he couldn't focus on. Carlos had found him that afternoon in the library. Slipped him a folded note when no one was looking. The paper had been warm from Carlos's pocket. Mateo had read it 3 times. Tomorrow night. Blackout. Not accident. Stay aware. Trust what Rosa taught you. Time to stop hiding. He'd burn the note in the fireplace immediately, the way he'd seen in movies. Now, hours later, the words still burned in his mind. His father had dismissed the storm warning during dinner. We have generators, Alvarez had signed. And if the power goes out, the backup system kicks in within seconds. Nothing to worry about. But Mateo worried anyway. He checked his phone. 9:47 p.m. Outside, lightning split the sky. In the flash of white light, he saw guards patrolling the grounds, shoulders hunched against the rain. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. Mateo stood and walked to his window. His room was in the east wing, 3rd floor, overlooking the gardens. From here, he could see the main gate, the driveway, the perimeter wall. Another lightning flash. For just a moment, he thought he saw movement beyond the wall. Shadows that didn't match the trees. But then darkness returned, and he couldn't be sure. He picked up his phone to text his father. The lights went out. Every single light in the mansion. Simultaneously, Mateo's room plunged into absolute darkness. His phone screen glowed, the only light. He used it to find his cane, then made his way to the door. He opened it. The hallway was pitch black. Emergency lights should have kicked on by now. Battery-powered strips along the floor, designed for exactly this situation. They were dark. That wasn't right. Mateo's heartbeat quickened. He felt the floor beneath his feet, solid, familiar, and started toward the stairs. He needed to find his father. Halfway down the hall, the floor shuddered. Just slightly. A vibration that traveled up through his legs. Footsteps. Heavy. Multiple people. Running. But not from inside the house. From outside. Mateo pressed himself against the wall, breathing carefully. He closed his eyes, not that it mattered in the darkness, and focused. Another vibration. Closer now. Then another. And another. A rhythm. Coordinated movement. Not guards doing rounds. Guards didn't move like that. These were intruders.
Mateo's mouth went dry.
Stay aware. Rosa's voice echoed in his memory. Trust your training. He turned and moved back toward his room, using his cane to navigate, keeping his footsteps soft. Inside, he locked the door and pushed his desk in front of it. He texted his father. Someone's inside. East Wing. No response. He texted again, Dad. Emergency. Nothing. The cell tower might be down. Or his father's phone might be dead.
Or.
The floor vibrated again.
Stronger this time.
Someone was in the hallway, right outside his door. Mateo backed away from the door, his cane tight in his hand. The door handle rattled.
Once. Twice.
Then a shoulder slammed against the door. The wood shuddered but held. Mateo's mind raced. His room had one door, one window. The window led to a 3-story drop onto stone pavement. The door was being broken down.
He was trapped. No.
Not trapped. Different, Rosa had said. Different can be powerful. Mateo moved quickly. He grabbed the chair from his desk, carried it to the window, and smashed it against the glass. The window cracked but didn't break. Bulletproof, like his father had said. Another slam against the door. The desk scraped forward an inch. Mateo struck the window again. And again. Finally, a section broke away, not large enough to climb through, but enough to let in the wind and rain. And enough to let out sound. He felt the floor beneath him. Felt the vibrations of chaos elsewhere in the mansion. Shouts, footsteps, something crashing. The door splintered. The desk tipped over. Mateo turned toward the door, dropping into the stance Rosa had taught him. Feet shoulder-width apart.
Niche bent.
Weight centered. Hands up. He couldn't see his attacker, but he could feel them. The floorboards creaked as someone stepped inside. Mateo waited. Patience. Let them come to you. The intruder moved forward, confident, unhurried. Probably thought Mateo was an easy target. Mateo felt the vibration of the footstep. He shifted left. The intruder lunged where Mateo had been standing a second ago. Mateo spun, using his cane like Rosa had shown him, not as a crutch but as an extension of his arm. He swung it hard, connected with something solid. A grunt. A body hitting the floor. Mateo didn't wait. He moved toward the door, feeling his way through the darkness, into the hallway. Behind him, the intruder was getting up.
Mateo ran.
Not toward the main stairs. They'd be guarded, but toward the servant staircase at the far end of the wing. Rosa had shown him the route during one of their sessions, mapping the mansion's hidden pathways. Another flash of lightning lit the hallway for half a second. Mateo saw 3 figures ahead of him. He turned and ran the other way. His father was somewhere in this chaos, and Mateo had to find him. Before the intruders did. The mansion had become a labyrinth of darkness. Mateo moved through it like water, silent, careful, adapting to every obstacle. He'd abandoned the East Wing entirely. Too many footsteps. Too many vibrations that didn't belong. He'd doubled back through the servants' passage, a narrow corridor hidden behind the linen closet that most people didn't know existed. Rosa had shown it to him during week 3 of training. Always know the escape routes, she'd said. Not just the obvious ones. Now, pressed against the wall of that passage, Mateo felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen lit his face in harsh blue light. A message from his father. Where are you? Mateo typed back quickly. Servants' passage. East Wing compromised. Where are you? The response came immediately. Office. Ground floor. Don't move. Guards coming. But Mateo felt the floor beneath him. He felt the vibrations of movement, not toward him, but around him, surrounding the office. The guards weren't coming to help. They were coming to finish the job. Mateo texted back. It's a trap. Get out. No response. He waited 5 seconds.
10.
Nothing. Mateo shoved his phone in his pocket and made a decision. He couldn't stay hidden while his father walked into an ambush. He moved through the passage, using his cane to sweep ahead for obstacles, counting his steps. The passage opened near the kitchen. From there, he could reach the office through the main corridor, assuming it wasn't blocked. He emerged into the kitchen. Empty. Silent. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating stainless steel and hanging pots. In that brief moment of light, Mateo saw the back door hanging open. Muddy footprints led inside. The intruders had come through here. Mateo moved toward the corridor. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to find somewhere safe and wait for this nightmare to end. But Rosa's voice was louder. "You're capable. Act like it." He stepped into the corridor. The floor vibrated, footsteps ahead, heavy and fast. Mateo pressed himself into an alcove, barely breathing. Two men passed within feet of him, boots pounding against marble. They were arguing in voices he couldn't hear, gesturing toward the office. When they passed, Mateo followed. Not close, just close enough to feel their footsteps. They stopped outside the office door. One of them kicked it open. Mateo heard nothing, but he felt the impact through the floor. He crept closer, staying low, staying quiet. Another lightning flash revealed the scene in frozen detail. His father, standing behind his desk, gun in hand. Two men in the doorway, weapons raised. A third man behind them, turning toward Mateo. Darkness returned. Mateo moved on instinct. He swept his cane low, hard, catching the third man behind the knees. The man toppled backward. Mateo felt the impact through the floor as the man hit the ground. One of the men in the doorway spun around. Mateo couldn't see him, but he felt the shift in air pressure as the man raised his arm. Mateo dropped flat. Something whistled over his head, a punch, maybe, or a weapon swung wild. Mateo rolled, came up in a crouch, and drove his cane upward like a spear. It connected with something soft. A stomach, maybe ribs. The man staggered back into the doorway. Inside the office, chaos erupted. Mateo felt vibrations, bodies colliding, furniture crashing, the sharp percussion of gunshots transmitted through the floor. His father was fighting, but so was Mateo. The third man grabbed Mateo's ankle. Mateo twisted, using the momentum Rosa had taught him, and kicked down hard with his free leg. The grip released. Mateo scrambled backward, breathing hard. He couldn't keep this up. He was outnumbered, outmatched, but he didn't need to win. He just needed to survive long enough. Feel the environment. Use everything. Mateo's back hit the wall. His hand found a decorative vase on a side table, heavy, ceramic. He grabbed it, waited, felt the vibration of someone lunging toward him. He swung the vase with everything he had. It shattered against something hard. A head, a shoulder, Mateo didn't know. But the vibration changed. The person dropped. Inside the office, his father appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by emergency lighting from somewhere deeper in the house. Alvarez was bleeding from his temple, his shirt torn. But he was alive. He saw Mateo and froze. For one impossible moment, father and son stared at each other in the flickering darkness. Then Alvarez moved. He grabbed Mateo's arm, pulling him into the office. He locked the door behind them and shoved a bookshelf in front of it. His hands moved frantically in the dim light. "Are you hurt?" Mateo shook his head. "What are you doing here?" Alvarez signed, anger and terror mixing on his face. "I told you to stay put. You were walking into a trap," Mateo signed back. "Someone had to warn you. You could have been killed." "So could you." They didn't have time to argue. The floor shuddered, more footsteps, more intruders regrouping. Alvarez looked around the office desperately. One door blocked. Windows barred. They were cornered. Mateo touched his father's arm, got his attention. Then he pointed to the floor. To the heating vent in the corner, the one that connected to the tunnel system his grandfather had built during the Cold War. The tunnels no one used anymore. The tunnels only Mateo and Rosa had explored during training. Alvarez's eyes widened. Mateo nodded. "Trust me," he signed. And for the first time, Alvarez did. The vent cover came off easily, too easily. Rust had weakened the screws years ago. Alvarez pulled it away and stared into the darkness beyond. A shaft dropped straight down about 6 feet, then opened into the tunnel system. He looked at Mateo, doubt flickering across his face. "You're sure about this?" Mateo nodded. He'd been down here twice with Rosa. Once to map the routes. Once to practice navigating in complete darkness. He went first. He lowered himself into the shaft, feeling for the metal rungs Rosa had pointed out. They were slick with condensation and decades of neglect, but they held. He dropped the last few feet, landing in a crouch on wet concrete. Above him, his father hesitated. The office door shuttered. Someone was ramming it. Alvarez climbed down. He was halfway into the shaft when the bookshelf toppled. The door burst open. Shouting. Mateo couldn't hear it, but he felt his father's urgency as Alvarez dropped the remaining distance, landing hard beside him. Mateo grabbed the vent cover from where it had fallen and jammed it back into place above them. It wouldn't hold for long, but it might buy them seconds. The tunnel stretched in 2 directions. Left toward the old wine cellar. Right toward the outer wall and the emergency exit near the garden. Mateo started right. His father grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. "Where are you going?" Alvarez signed in the faint glow of his phone's flashlight. "Exit." Mateo signed back. "Garden side. That's 50 meters through complete darkness."
"I know. You can't see."
"Neither can you right now," Mateo signed. "But I've done this before." Alvarez stared at his son. Behind them, metal scraped against metal. Someone was trying to open the vent. They were out of time.
"Stay close," Mateo signed.
"And turn off your phone."
"What?"
"The light will give us away." "Turn it off." Alvarez's jaw tightened. But he turned off the phone. Total darkness swallowed them. Mateo felt his father's hand grip his shoulder, tight, terrified. "Touch my wrist." Mateo signed into his father's palm. "I'll guide you." He felt his father's fingers wrap around his left wrist. Then Mateo started walking. The tunnel was narrow. Concrete walls on both sides, rough and damp. The floor sloped slightly downward, pooled with water in places. Mateo moved slowly, but steadily. He kept his right hand on the wall, feeling for the markers Rosa had taught him to recognize. 3 paces. A crack in the concrete shaped like a Y. 7 more paces. A pipe jutting out at shoulder height. Behind them, the vent cover clattered to the ground. Footsteps echoed in the shaft. Mateo squeezed his father's wrist twice. Faster. They moved quicker now, but Mateo didn't run. Running meant mistakes. Mistakes meant injuries. He felt the wall change texture, from rough concrete to old brick. That meant they were passing under the courtyard. Alvarez's breathing was ragged behind him. The man was used to control, to seeing threats coming, to having the upper hand. Now he was blind, helpless, completely dependent on his son. Mateo squeezed his wrist once.
"Keep going."
They rounded a corner. Mateo felt the air change, less stale, slightly cooler. Fresh air from somewhere ahead. But he also felt something else. Vibrations. Different from their own footsteps. Someone else was in the tunnel. Mateo stopped. Squeezed his father's wrist 3 times.
"Danger."
Alvarez froze. They stood in the darkness, not breathing, not moving. The vibration came again. Closer. Whoever it was, they were using a light. Mateo could see the faint glow reflecting off the wet walls ahead. They were trapped. Pursuers behind them. Someone ahead. Mateo's mind raced. Then he remembered something Rosa had said. When you can't go forward or back, go invisible. He pulled his father to the side, into a small alcove where pipes ran along the ceiling. It was barely large enough for one person, let alone 2. But they pressed themselves into it, making themselves as small as possible. The light grew brighter. Footsteps splashed through water. A figure passed within 3 feet of them. A guard, maybe, or one of the intruders. In the sweep of the flashlight beam, Mateo caught a glimpse of a face he didn't recognize. The figure kept moving, heading deeper into the tunnel. Mateo counted to 10, then 20. He squeezed his father's wrist once.
Move.
They continued forward. The air grew fresher. The tunnel widened. Ahead, Matteo saw it, a sliver of gray light. Not bright, but compared to the absolute darkness, it was like dawn. The emergency exit. They were close. Matteo moved faster now. His father kept pace, no longer hesitating, trusting completely. They reached the exit, a metal door, rusted but functional. Matteo felt for the latch. It was stiff, corroded. He pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder. Behind them, voices echoed in the tunnel. More footsteps. Alvarez joined him, both of them pulling on the latch. It gave way with a metallic screech. The door swung open. Rain and wind poured in. The storm was still raging, but after the suffocating darkness of the tunnel, it felt like freedom. They stumbled out into the garden, gasping, soaking wet. Matteo turned to close the door behind them, but his father stopped him. "Leave it," Alvarez signed. "Let them think we went farther." Matteo nodded. They moved away from the exit, into the cover of the hedges and trees. Behind them, the mansion burned with emergency lights now, the backup generators finally working. But by then, it was too late to stop what had already happened. Father and son crouched in the rain, alive, together. And Alvarez finally understood. His son hadn't just survived. He'd saved them both. The hospital wing of the mansion smelled like antiseptic and blood. By dawn, the storm had passed. So had the attack. 4 intruders captured. 3 dead. 2 escaped. 6 guards injured. 1 critical. Matteo sat in a chair by the window, a blanket around his shoulders, watching the sun rise over the gardens. His knuckles were bandaged. His knee was swollen. But he was alive. His father stood across the room, talking to the head of security, arguing, "Really?" Alvarez's temple had been stitched, 7 stitches, neat and black. His shirt was still torn. He hadn't changed. He hadn't left Matteo's side except for this conversation. Finally, the security chief left, and Alvarez walked over to his son. He sat down heavily in the chair beside Matteo. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then Alvarez's hands began to sign.
"I'm sorry."
Matteo looked at him, surprised. "I didn't listen," Alvarez continued. "I didn't see you. I saw what I was afraid of, not who you actually are." Matteo's throat tightened. He'd imagined this conversation 100 times. But now that it was happening, he didn't know what to say. "You saved my life," Alvarez signed. "You stayed calm when I panicked. You knew the way when I was lost. You did everything I said you couldn't do." "Rosa trained me," Matteo signed back. "I know," Alvarez signed. "And I fired her for it." The weight of that statement hung between them. A nurse entered, checked Matteo's bandages, and left quietly. When they were alone again, Alvarez pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward Matteo. It was security footage. The timestamp read 22:17, just after the blackout began. The angle showed the corridor outside Matteo's room. The video was grainy, lit only by emergency lights that flickered on and off. Matteo watched himself on screen. Watched the moment the intruder broke into his room. Watched himself dodge, strike, escape. The footage jumped to another camera. The corridor outside the office. Matteo attacking the third man. Using his cane like a weapon. Moving with precision despite the darkness. Then the footage jumped again. The tunnel.
Infrared camera.
Matteo leading his father through complete darkness.
No hesitation.
No fear. Alvarez stopped the video. "I watched this 3 times," he signed. "I kept waiting to see the moment where you got lucky. Where you survived by accident."
He paused.
But it wasn't luck. It was skill. Training. Everything Rosa taught you. Matteo looked down at his hands. "I was so afraid of losing you," Alvarez signed, "that I almost killed you myself. By keeping you weak. By convincing you that you were helpless. You were trying to protect me," Matteo signed. "Protection and imprisonment aren't the same thing," Alvarez signed back. "I'm starting to understand that now." The door opened again. This time it was Carlos, the driver. He looked exhausted, his uniform disheveled. "Boss," Carlos said aloud, then caught himself. He signed awkwardly. "The interrogations are finished." The men talked.
And?
Alvarez signed. Carlos glanced at Mateo, then back to Alvarez. "They were hired by the Rojas family, paid to humiliate you before the kill. They had orders to," he hesitated, "to hurt your family first." Alvarez's face went cold. "Mateo stopped 3 of them," Carlos continued, "before they reached the family wing. If he hadn't been there, if he hadn't fought back." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Carlos left. Alvarez stood and walked to the window. He stared out at the gardens, at the morning light turning everything gold. "I told Santo you were useless in a real fight," Alvarez signed without turning around. Mateo's chest tightened. So his father had known that Mateo overheard the mockery at the warehouse. "I didn't defend you," Alvarez signed. "I told him to stop, but I didn't tell him he was wrong." He turned back to face Mateo. "He was wrong," Alvarez signed. "And so was I." Mateo felt something break loose in his chest. Not quite forgiveness. Not quite relief. Something in between. "What happens now?" Mateo signed. Alvarez walked back to the chair.
Sat down.
Looked at his son directly. "Now we make changes," he signed. "Real ones. Starting with finding Rosa." Mateo's eyes widened. "You were right about her," Alvarez signed. "I was wrong. And I need to fix that." "You're going to hire her back." "No," Alvarez signed. "I'm going to apologize to her. And then I'm going to ask her, not order her, ask her if she'll come back. Not as a maid. As something more important."
"What?"
Alvarez smiled slightly. It was a tired smile, but genuine.
"I don't know yet," he signed.
"But whatever it is, she'll have authority, respect, and resources." Mateo's hands moved quickly. "You mean it?" "I've never meant anything more in my life," Alvarez signed. He reached out and squeezed Mateo's shoulder, gentle, careful. "You're not helpless," Alvarez signed. "You never were." "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Mateo nodded, not trusting himself to sign anything back. Outside, the grounds were filling with morning light. The mansion had survived the night. And so had they. But more than that, they'd changed. And sometimes surviving and changing together was the hardest fight of all. Rosa was packing again. 2 weeks in the boarding house had been enough. The walls were thin. The neighbors were loud. And every morning she woke up thinking about Mateo, wondering if he was safe, if he'd listened to her warning. The news had reported an incident at the Alvarez estate. No details. No casualties mentioned. Just vague language about a home invasion thwarted by private security. She'd wanted to call.
To check.
To make sure Mateo was alive. But she had no right. Not anymore. Now, standing in her small room with her duffel bag open on the bed, she was preparing to leave the city entirely. There was a bus to the coast at 3. From there, she could disappear. Start over somewhere new. Again. She was folding her last shirt when someone knocked on the door.
Rosa Froze.
Landlords didn't knock. Neighbors didn't knock. And she wasn't expecting anyone. She moved to the door carefully, silently, looked through the peephole, and saw Alvarez. He stood in the dingy hallway of the boarding house, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit. His face was drawn, tired. The stitches on his temple were still visible. Rosa's heart hammered. She opened the door. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "How did you find me?" Rosa asked finally. "Carlos told me where you were staying," Alvarez said. "I asked him to keep track. In case." He trailed off. "In case what?" Rosa's voice was guarded. "In case I needed to say I was wrong." Rosa's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "May I come in?" Alvarez asked. Rosa hesitated, then stepped aside. Alvarez entered the small room. He looked around, at the narrow bed, the single window, the duffel bag half-packed on the chair. "You're leaving," he said. "That was always the plan. Where will you go?" "Does it matter?" Alvarez turned to face her. "It matters to me." Rosa crossed her arms. Why are you here, Mr. Alvarez? To apologize. You already fired me. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, Alvarez said quietly.
Rosa blinked.
Alvarez moved to the window, looking out at the street below. 2 weeks ago, men broke into my home. They cut the power, breached the gates. They were going to kill me, kill my family. Rosa's face remained carefully neutral, but her hands tightened slightly. My son stopped 3 of them, Alvarez continued. In the dark. Alone. Using everything you taught him. He turned back to face Rosa. Then he led me through tunnels I didn't even remember existed. Through complete darkness. Without sight. Without sound. Just touch and trust. Rosa's throat tightened. I watched the security footage afterward, Alvarez said. I saw what he did. How he moved. How he fought. And I realized something. What? You didn't just teach him to defend himself, Alvarez said. You taught him that he was capable, that his disability wasn't a weakness, that he could be strong in ways I never imagined. Alvarez's voice cracked slightly. You gave him something I couldn't, something I was too afraid to give him. What's that? Rosa asked softly. Dignity, Alvarez said. The right to protect himself. The right to be more than just protected. Silence filled the small room. I fired you for trying to help my son, Alvarez said. I accused you of cruelty when you were showing him kindness. I was wrong. Completely wrong. And I'm sorry. Rosa looked at him for a long moment. Your apology doesn't change what happened. I know. It doesn't undo the harm. I know, Alvarez repeated. But I'm hoping it's a start. A start to what? Alvarez took a breath. I want you to come back. Rosa shook her head immediately. I'm not going back to being your maid. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? I'm asking you to come back as head of security training, Alvarez said. Not just for Mateo. For all my guards. For anyone in my organization who needs to learn what you know. Rosa stared at him. You're serious? Completely. You'll have your own facility. Your own budget. Full authority over curriculum and training methods. Alvarez pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is a contract. Read it.
Think about it.
The salary is more than fair. He set the envelope on the small table. Rosa didn't touch it. Why? She asked. Why now? Because I spent years thinking strength meant walls and guns and control, Alvarez said. But my son showed me something different. He showed me that real strength is awareness, adaptability, trusting yourself even when everything is falling apart. He paused. He learned that from you. And I want others to learn it too. Rosa walked to the table,
picked up the envelope,
felt its weight. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need, Alvarez said. But before you decide, there's someone who wants to see you. Rosa looked up sharply. Mateo? Alvarez nodded. He's downstairs. In the car. He wanted to come up, but I told him I needed to talk to you first. Rosa's hands tightened around the envelope. He misses you, Alvarez said quietly. He asks about you every day. Rosa closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were bright with emotion. Tell him to come up, she said. Alvarez smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time since entering the room. Thank you, he said.
He left.
Rosa stood alone in the small room, holding the envelope, her duffel bag forgotten. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hallway. A knock. Lighter this time. Hesitant. Rosa opened the door. Mateo stood there, leaning on his cane, eyes red. His hands moved immediately. I missed you. Rosa pulled him into a hug. And for the first time in 2 weeks, she let herself cry. 3 months later, the new training facility sat on the north edge of the Alvarez property, where the old stables had once been. Alvarez had gutted the building completely, transforming it into something that looked more like a dojo than a warehouse. Padded floors, mirrored walls, equipment designed for adaptation, balance beams, sensory deprivation chambers, obstacle courses that changed configuration weekly. And in the center of it all, Rosa. She stood at the front of the room now, arms crossed, watching as 12 guards moved through their exercises. Blindfolded. Every single one of them. They stumbled. They fell. They cursed under their breath. But they learned. Feel the floor, Rosa called out. Stop relying on your eyes. Your eyes lie. Your body tells the truth. One guard, Marco, Santo's cousin, lost his balance and crashed into a padded wall. Rosa walked over to him. What happened? I couldn't see where I was going, Marco said, frustrated. Exactly, Rosa said. So stop trying to see. Start trying to feel. She tapped the floor with her foot, creating a vibration. That's north. Everything else orients from there. Marco nodded, adjusting his blindfold, trying again. Rosa moved through the room, correcting postures, adjusting stances, offering quiet encouragement. At the back of the room, Matteo worked with a new student, a young woman named Elena who'd lost hearing in one ear after an explosion. She was learning to compensate, to use her remaining senses more effectively. Matteo guided her hand to the floor, showing her how to read vibrations. His signing was fast now, confident. Elena nodded, understanding. Matteo smiled. Rosa watched them for a moment, something warm settling in her chest. The door to the facility opened, and Alvarez stepped inside. He'd been coming to observe the training sessions regularly, not to interfere but to learn. To understand what his son had understood months ago. That strength wasn't just about power. It was about adaptation. Rosa walked over to him. You're late. Meeting ran long, Alvarez said. How are they doing? Better. Marco still fights the blindfold, but he's improving. Alvarez watched his guards stumbling through the darkness. 6 months ago, he would have called this a waste of time. Now he saw it for what it was, essential. Santo's been asking questions, Alvarez said quietly. About the training. About why I'm investing so much in it. He thinks it's unnecessary. Rosa's expression hardened. Santo thought a lot of things were unnecessary, including your son. Alvarez nodded slowly.
I am handling Santo.
Good. They stood in silence, watching the training continue. Then Alvarez said, There's something I wanted to ask you. What? I've been approached by other families. 3 of them, actually. They've heard about what you're doing here. They want similar programs. Rosa looked at him sharply. You told them no. I told them I'd ask you first, Alvarez said. This is your program. Your methods. If you want to expand, I'll support it. If you want to keep it private, I'll respect that. Rosa considered this. What do you want? I want what's best for people like Matteo, Alvarez said. People who've been told their whole lives that they're weak, that they can't, that they shouldn't even try. He looked at her directly. You proved that's a lie. And I think more people deserve to know that. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. We'll expand. But on my terms. No compromises on the training. No shortcuts. Agreed. Across the room, Matteo finished his session with Elena. He walked over to his father and Rosa, moving steadily, barely using his cane anymore. How did she do? Alvarez signed. Great, Matteo signed back. She's faster than I was at this stage. That's because she has a better teacher than I did, Rosa signed with a small smile. Matteo grinned. You taught us both. The 3 of them stood together, watching the guards continue their training. One by one, they were learning. Learning to move without sight. To sense without sound. To trust their bodies in ways they never had before. And in doing so, they were becoming something more than just guards. They were becoming aware. Adaptable. Unbreakable. I've been thinking, Alvarez signed to Matteo, about what you said. About not wanting to be hidden anymore. Matteo's expression grew serious. I'm going to introduce you publicly, Alvarez continued. At the charity gala next month. As my son. As part of the family business. Matteo's eyes widened. Are you sure? No, Alvarez signed honestly. It still terrifies me. But you were right. Hiding you doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you small. What changed your mind? Matteo signed. Alvarez looked at Rosa, then back at his son. You did, he signed. You showed me that strength isn't about being untouchable. It's about being capable, about trusting yourself even when the world is chaos. He paused. I can't protect you from everything, but I can give you the tools to protect yourself. That's what a father should do. Mateo's eyes were wet. He nodded, unable to sign anything back. Alvarez pulled him into a hug, brief but genuine. When they separated, Rosa was smiling.
You're both learning, she said.
We had a good teacher, Alvarez replied. Outside, the sun was setting over the estate. The gardens were turning gold. The walls still stood, strong and high. But inside those walls, something fundamental had changed. Fear had given way to trust. Control had given way to capability. And a boy who'd once been hidden away was now teaching others how to stand in the light. Rosa looked at Mateo, at Alvarez, at the guards training in the facility. And she thought of Miguel. I couldn't save you, she thought. But maybe I saved him. And maybe that's enough. Mateo caught her eye and signed something simple. Thank you. Rosa signed back. Thank you for letting me. The training continued. The world kept turning. And strength, real strength, was finally being redefined. Not by walls or weapons, but by awareness, balance, and the courage to trust yourself in the dark.